Perfect. There we go.
Hi,
All
everybody.
right. Welcome, Senator. Welcome, welcome. Thank you so much
Thanks
for,
for
for
having me.
coming by. All right. So we're just gonna give it like one more minute just to make sure everyone comes in. We are still running on Miami time despite it being digital. Let's give it one more minute. Sophia, actually, do you mind if you can, if you're there, to introduce yourself?
Hi guys. Yeah, I'm here. Can everybody hear me all right? All right, awesome.
Yes.
So hi everybody. My name is Sophia Thomas. I am the president of the FIU chapter of College Democrats. We've been running for maybe about a year or so now. I was kind of hoping to have my vice president with me today, but he might be running a little late. I'm not sure. So we might see him, we might not.
That's fair. But yeah, so one of the things that MDYD is trying to do more is work directly with college Dems to try to get some more action there with Rachel as well. Do we have Rachel? I don't think we have Rachel here. From Dems. One thing that's very weird is that MDC Dems is basically like dead, which is kind of wild to me because it has 250,000 students. So we're also going to try to figure out a way to revive MDC Dems because we need all the help we can get, and colleges are usually a really good way to get people funneled in. All right. Okay. So I think we're going to go ahead and get started. So once again, welcome, Senator. We really appreciate you accepting our invitation. First of all, I'd like to know, are you in Tallahassee right now at the moment, or?
Yeah, we're in Tallahassee. We nerd out a little bit and we read all these bills. And tomorrow's the deadline for the release of everyone's final sort of draft to hit the public. Today we spent 9.5 hours at a state prison meeting with all 67 wardens throughout the state. Because we're really trying to push more vocation and education programs, but also a safe space for them to talk to a few of us about their needs for staffing and not having so much employee attrition. So yeah, we tend to just hit it and not go back and forth a lot. So we're staying in Tallahassee. We've been here.
Gotcha. Okay. So I'd actually like to open up really quick. We had some big news from your office this week, which is that you decided that you were not definitively, after months of speculation, to run for governor. My question is, what sense do you get as to why you ended up making that decision? Because I know a lot of people did want you to run.
So I have two identical twin 14-year-old boys, and they're kind of like my lens through certain things, sometimes vicarious, but certainly to see if I'm doing well or I'm righting some wrongs or making any type of change. I do filter it through them, and they're very honest, like brutally honest with their assessment of how things are going. They've also seen a lot since they were very young. When I was a prosecutor for a number of years, they remember me coming home, handling shootings and homicides of kids. They've been pulled out of their own house twice. So they have an appreciation for this, and they know why I'm here and why I ran. And I didn't do the city council, city commission, city mayor, county commission, county mayor, state representative. The last elected office I held was senior class president in high school. And I don't want to tell you how many years ago. But leaping to that point as a first part, listen, we're in a hyper-partisan, incredibly polarized atmosphere, as everybody knows, whether it's rhetoric or it's real to some extent. But I'm just in my first term, and to be named the chair of criminal justice in a completely hyper-partisan Republican majority House, Republican majority Senate, executive branch, and the judiciary with the last few appointments also leans right, is an incredible honor. And it comes with a bit of a lot of latitude and poetic license to actually have conversations in a space that's never happened in probably my lifetime, much less your guys' lifetime, about the things that we're able to hear. Just, last week to hear a hate crimes bill that now includes gender ID. No Republican chair ever would have heard that. And it passed. It actually passed out of committee because we're starting to have real conversations. We're taking advantage of the fact that so much comes out of the legislature. And I tell this to 7th grade civics classes all the way up to the Miami Dolphins executive. And what I mean by that is when we see tragedies and horrible things occur, they are very often overwhelmingly state actions, right? They're not national things. I mean, everybody knows who's running for president, but I teach like a bullseye method when I talk to classes. But like the center of the bullseye is your home and your family and your friends. Outside of that is your city, then your county, then your state, and then your federal. So when I ask a 7th grade civics class, who's running for president, who's president, everybody knows. And then I ask, raise your hand if you know who your city mayor is. Nobody. And I go, listen, did you turn the water on today? Do you expect your streetlights to work? Do you expect your garbage to be picked up? Do you expect your streets to be safe, to be able to walk on and have recreation? Yeah. Do you think that's Joe Biden or Donald Trump? No. And then they start to understand the bullseye. And it also speaks to advocacy about how loud your voice is. The best sort of litmus test when we're talking about engagement or people that are engaged at any age, in any place, in any space is really, I always ask, this is the next question I ask everybody to raise your hand. Raise your hand if everybody on this Zoom call knows the neighbor who lives to the left of you, the right of you, and across from you, and whether or not you could go knock on their door right now and borrow something. How many of you could? Now, okay, Andrew could. So that I see on my screen. Maybe more can. But my point is, when you were much younger, even in your lifetime or your parents' lifetime, in my lifetime, we knew everybody in the neighborhood and everybody knew us. And we ate dinner over each other's houses, and it didn't matter if it was black, white, brown. If someone was doing better than somebody else, the moms took in when they had some money and some food. And that's just the way it worked. It was a true community. The reason why I asked that question is because I come across people who are so passionate about a particular issue or a number of issues. And I say, how authentic and organic do you think that you're conveying, or how it's coming across, if you're not even engaging with the person who lives 50 feet away from you?
Now, on that note, so why do you think there's been a kind of like a breakdown of community in that sense? Because you're drawing the comparison to how you grew up to how most of us grew up. Neighbors immediately to my right and left are, but I also know a ton more people who live in New York City and in California, right? So how do you think of how would you put that into the context of what you're saying?
So you come from personal experience or personal passion, either by tragedy, trauma, or feeling of good fortune and wonderment, as to what motivates you to do what you do, or to do what I do. So yeah, we're certainly more global, and we certainly have more access, and we get things. Some of our relationships are as quick and as efficient as Amazon. But I don't know that just having people available is necessarily, sort of says in the chat. And I just don't know that it's resonating so much. So it speaks to where you are. So when you ask me my very loquacious, verbose, and ornamental response to, why did I make that decision, is because I think I'm at the infancy of state action and being able to steer and control state action. Remember, back from when we were all in 6th grade, there's the executive branch, which enforces the laws that the legislative branch makes, and the judicial branch interprets those. But the base of it is really all those laws that are made and why those laws are made. So lawmaking is huge, and it's critical. And I certainly don't think that I've spent enough time by just being in the first half of my first term and then having that access to have a chairmanship like that of such a critical committee. Remember, the committee that I chair is the only one that deals with people's liberty and freedom. Everything else, while maybe important to some people, banking, insurance, agriculture, important thing, and people's liberty are the most important thing, especially when it's selectively enforced and completely inequitable, to particular people.
So for the time being, you wouldn't consider either being someone else's running mate, nothing like that. You want to focus specifically on building the community, spending more time in this longer term project. That's what. Is
Listen,
that
one
what
of the
we're
reasons
getting?
why I ran is because there's a shooting every 36 or 37 hours in my district. Okay. And disproportionately, victims are young Black males. And while we would all agree, I would hope that something like Marjorie Stoneman Douglas is an incredible tragedy that took the lives of teenagers, 18 and under, die every year in Miami-Dade County from gun violence. And you don't know their name. And there are no marches or rallies for them. And that's what I spent 100 hours working on a week for several straight years because they had no voice. But I assure you, their mothers and fathers did not love those kids any less than the ones that you see on Time Magazine or on CNN. And we have such an incredibly exacerbated divide that we have young people who are right and authentic to question what is society, what does my government value my life at? And I will tell you that we've demonstrated that it's markedly less than others.
Now, do you think there's a charm to a third time around for Miss Daphne Campbell now that she's announced?
I don't know. I'll never be able to compete with those music videos. But listen, I mean, you know, I have a lot of critics. I get a lot of criticism. I deserve a lot of it. But I don't think anyone questions my work ethic and that I'm in this, you know, to right or wrong. And people sometimes say, like, what's your motivation? Who is your role model? Whatever. Strangely, my sort of ethos, if you've ever heard the eulogy given for Bobby Kennedy's funeral that Ted Kennedy gives, he basically just says, my brother need not be idolized greater in death than he was in life. Just a simple person who tried to right a wrong, who saw pain and tried to heal, you know, that sort of thing. I'm incredibly fortunate. I worked really, really, really hard when I was younger and I got lucky. And this is supposed to be a part-time legislature, but I do this 100 hours a week. I left the house at 6:45 this morning and, you know, I raced to get in. I had one French fry before I jumped on with you guys. But I love it. I pop out of bed every morning excited, but I'm not doing this because I want to go do a ribbon cutting or take selfies. I do this because I want to change lives, help and improve lives. And many of the ones that we touch and we help, you'll never hear from because it's not unlike when I was a prosecutor. I'm meeting you at the worst time in your life. And I'm just trying to help you, whether it's food insecurity, housing insecurity, education, you know, safer streets. We are making a change.
I know that your office was really instrumental in assisting a lot of people for unemployment. If you don't mind giving us a few words about how what that was like.
We all, you know, and sometimes I have temporary or momentary pity for the other side, so to speak, because I know that, you know, that the system was ecumenical in its treatment. You know, we had unemployed Republicans as much as we had unemployed Democrats. So it really wasn't a situation where it was like C in the beginning, because it was like a website that didn't work. And then DeSantis started blaming Rick Scott then started blaming Charlie Crist, and, you know, so on and so forth. It's like, okay, great. And I said this, you know, pretty transparently and loudly in the beginning, like, okay, DeSantis gets like 2 to 3 weeks to complain about the last guy that had this, but now it's your responsibility. Now, yeah, we all know it's a jalopy. We all know it's a bad problem. We finished session March 18th or 19th this past year. And we all went home and we all got the emails. We all got the text messages and Facebook messages and Instagram and pleas for help. And oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And Maggie, my right arm, and I just, and not to discredit or discount any other legislator who was making calls and answering emails and being diligent. A lot of the Dade delegation senators and representatives were doing the same. But people also have jobs. This is a part-time legislature. People do have to go to work. I'm fortunate that this is a full-time, I committed to it, I campaigned on it, that this is what I do 7 days a week. I'm going home tomorrow just for 24 hours so I can make 3 constituent visits, 1 kid that was killed in a car crash. I'm going to go meet with his family, meet with 3 rabbis because the Republicans are proposing another gun bill yet again to go into churches, even with school grounds. And I need to get surrogates and get some help. But Yeah, I mean, it's sorry, I can go on and on and on and on.
No worries. But I mean, yeah, I did want.
We came back up here, and I wanted to do this, and this is not something that I advertised or took a picture of, or I just came up and I wanted to see the situation where the sort of dynamic or the mindset of the governor's office here, and I wanted to see this whole DEO operation of economic opportunity. And it got so bad that when I came up here on the drive up, I ended up writing down 6 names. It was 6 women, 4 were single mothers, 2 married, 3 with cancer. And I hand wrote the card on one of my personal Senate cards, the stationary cards. And I walked over and I handed it to the legislative affairs director at the governor's office inside the Capitol. And I said, let me see how fast you take care of these 6 people. I'm not talking about thousands. I'm not talking about hundreds. I'm talking about these 6 women right here. How fast can you help them? It took a month to get to the 6th person. Took a month. So that showed how bad it was, how miserable process. And then you guys remember the call center workers, like the governor announced, I'm buying 72 new servers and I'm hiring 6,000 call center workers. Well, then I started getting call center workers, a large group, like from the 22 to 28-year-old range demographic. They started texting me on Facebook. I guess they did like Kevin Bacon a little bit, and they're like, all right, Pizzo's cool. He's not going to blow us up. So people started reaching out to me and they're like, Senator, I work for a call center and we're not doing anything. People wait on the phone, for 8 hours, and we're not actually given the authority to submit their application. So we're going into each work shift knowing we can't do anything for anybody. So I explained this to the governor's office. I'm like, listen, you guys aren't getting any bang for your buck here on the $109 million you spent. And even the DEO staff came over to my office here. It was, an empty building at the Senate. And they're like, oh, we heard that you have, they're fully authorized. And I couldn't get a straight answer. So I asked one of the call center workers who reached out to me personally. I go, would you mind if I flew you up to Tallahassee? I'll take care of your hotel. I'll take care of your flight. I need you to spend about 3 days here. And doing what, Senator? I just need you to sit in the conference room at the Aloft Hotel in Tallahassee. I'm going to invite some people to come watch you do what you do. She's like, okay. So she flew up here, sweetheart, spent 4 days actually in the conference room. And I had the Senate president, incoming president's office come, some House members come, DEO come, and the entire governor's staff come and watch. And they walked out of there mortified that tens of millions of dollars were going out the door to assist and help. And she had a caller who was blind call in. Wow. And she's like, I can't submit his application for him. And the DEO person was like, no, just hit the submit button right there. She's like, it's all grayed out. I have the highest clearance and training, and I can't submit a blind person's unemployment application. Wow. So that we kind of blew that up. But I didn't go public with those things because I wanted to see if they were willing to, to give and do a remedy. So we stopped doing a lot of the popular things, like there were these smart sheets that people were sending in, and we found them basically to be useless. It was just kind of like a waiting room, glorified waiting room. So I was like, listen, this is what we want. And I said, listen, you tell me what's the perfect way to hand you the information of these people. So we developed a Google Doc with a spreadsheet, and we just delivered it. So we've done, I think we're past 40,000 people. That's astonishing. That's astonishing. I think that's a really good example. I'm sure you know this, the Florida legislature was designed for 19th century farmers, right? Where they would basically go to Tallahassee for, 3 months out of the year and then go back to their plantations for the rest of the year. Well, that's why courts are called circuit courts, because there was no central location that everybody would come to. There'd be like one sort of headquarters, but the judges would literally get on like the chuck wagon and go do a circuit around the area and go hear disputes and resolve cases while they were going around in the circuit. Right. That makes perfect. Yeah. There you go. So the session starts on March 2nd, and it goes on until May 1st. I don't imagine there'll be a special session. You'll have more insight as to that as myself, but I wanted to touch base on one of the more controversial bills. Well, actually, there's a lot of controversial bills. There's only one controversial bill? Right. Thank you for correcting me. So HB1, right? And I know that there was a special interest with you, given that you were chair of the Criminal Justice Committee.
I wanted to ask you, what is your sense for what's going to happen to that bill?
So as you guys remember from Schoolhouse Rock, right? I'm just a bill on Capitol Hill. It actually has to go through both houses. So if there's something
I'm
criminal
sorry,
justice
Senator.
related,
I should clarify.
yeah.
Do you mind giving a brief summary as to what HB1 is, in case for those who don't know?
Okay, so House Bill, HB just means House Bill, right? Which means that there's always a SB, which is a Senate bill counterpart, or there should be. Sometimes people file it and forget to get a sponsor in the other house. But House Bill 1, HB1, is words reduced to writing in a bill draft based on the governor's September 20th, I believe, announcement at a podium with the incoming Senate president and incoming House Speaker and a bunch of sheriff's deputies standing behind him, making an announcement at a podium that enough was enough and Florida was a law and order state. And we're going to start. I'm proposing that the legislature file and pass a bill and bring it to me to sign, to my desk to sign, that will combat this incredibly egregious public disorder that we have going on here with violent protests in the state of Florida. And so there was a bunch of bullet points. They were on news channels, especially Fox. The rumored initial proposal actually had expanded stand your ground in it and some RICO stuff, and that was even put up on the screen at news stations. And then by the time it actually got to drafting and became a bill in the House and the Senate, some parts were removed, but still remains 19 sections of a bill that in some parts enhances criminal penalties, makes things go from first-degree misdemeanors to third-degree felonies, or third-degree felonies to second-degree felonies, speaks to the treatment of memorials and statues, speaks to the responsibility and obligations and duties of city and municipal officials as it relates to police budgets, and then speaks to the police budgets itself. And then there are a number of other sections as well. A lot of them are bumping things up and then making certain definitions. So you'll have definitions that relate to what mob intimidation is, what a mob is, what a riot is, an unlawful assembly. So that's basically the structure of the bill.
Right.
Now, it's gone through its first committee, heading to its second committee in the House. So if you're so let's say, for instance, the Miami-Dade Young Dems are like, Senator Pizzo, we really need you to file a bill to make it illegal to I don't know, park a car on an avenue on Tuesdays, right? Well, I have to get a House sponsor to do the same thing. We have to file the same bills. Along the way, the House might, through each of its committees, it's going to be referred, let's say, to 3 or 4 committees, and the Senate's going to be referred to 3 or 4 committees. You have to successfully pass each committee by a majority vote before it gets to the floor, the large domed room where we're all like walking around pretending like we're saying things important when we're really talking about what we ate for dinner the night before. It has to successfully pass through each one of those committees to even get to the floor, okay? It's been referred to 3 committees in the House. That bill has been referred to 3 committees in the Senate. The first committee of reference in the House, it passed through with the majority vote, with the Republican majority vote. And it's now headed to its second committee. But even though session is just starting on Tuesday, March 2nd, we're already in our 5th week of committees that have met. So that bill will be heard in short order in the House. It just hasn't been heard yet for some reason.
Right, and we've had a lot of people come on to talk about criticize the bill. Melba Pearson has been very vocal, saying that a lot of the provisions of the bill that are designed to quote unquote punish rioters are there are already laws on the books for that, and the fact that Governor DeSantis basically did a 180 and said, well, actually, the bill is in response to the Capitol Hill riots, right? Everyone knows that that's frankly BS, right? This was in response to the overwhelming Black Lives Matter protests from last summer, which myself and many people here participated in. So, I kind of wanted to get a little bit more insight as to, do you expect that first of all, do you expect the bill will pass as a result of the Republican majority? And if so, would there be a way to at least challenge it in federal court?
Well, it could be, things can be challenged in state court as well. The 10th Amendment basically says that which is not reserved by the federal government is left to the states. The states must carry at least the same constitutional protections, but they may carry greater constitutional protections for their citizens in all 50 states. Yeah, listen, I spent a lot of time on Amendment 4, which was also not a great bill, but it was a lot less bad than what their first draft was, by engaging with the other side and sort of reaching across the aisle like you hear. That's effective reaching across the aisle, which is, hey guys, listen, you don't even have a provision in here for somebody that wants to restore their rights in the Amendment 4 bill for judges. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, a judge can't touch a sentence after 60 days. That's the law by statute. Oh, okay. And we chipped away, and still not a good bill, less bad than the first draft. On the murder definition, they had like 18 things listed, and we got it whittled down to like 2. Okay, they wanted, all kinds. They wanted attempted crimes to be qualified as murder offenses, and of course they're not. Murder is a completed act. So we sort of picked our battles on that. The governor was not happy with that finished product of a bill. Now, he called for a bill. Remember, the governor, when he was then candidate, DeSantis, ran and campaigned against Amendment 4. The Attorney General, Ashley Moody, ran and campaigned against Amendment 4. So as soon as he won and the bill passed overwhelmingly with 5,148,000 votes, I mean, a cool million more votes than any candidate got. Okay, that's kind of a mandate from the electorate. He immediately said, well, the legislature is going to have to send me a bill to implement this. And everybody's like, no, it's self-executing. It is what it is. It speaks for itself. The Latin term res ipsa loquitur, the thing speaks for itself. And he's like, no, I need a bill, which was basically amounted to the legislature on the Republican side drafting bills on both sides. That bill sucked. Okay, the first draft sucked. So what I did was I sent a letter to the Attorney General on April 9th of my first term, and I said, would you please, I know I join millions of Floridians who are incredibly interested in knowing your reaction and your legal opinion, because I'm allowed to do it as a legislature to seek a legal opinion from the Attorney General. Would you please give us your definition of sentence? And she wouldn't respond. But what I did get from her office was, and this, to me, this was a huge win. I know this is kind of nerdy from a legal sense, but you guys will understand and hopefully appreciate what I'm saying. She did not respond, and she sent me a letter. Her office sent me a letter, and it said, Senator Pizzo, we received your request for the definition of sentence. We do not comment on pending legislation or pending litigation, which for me was a win, because that means that she can never chime in during her tenure to help the other side on interpreting a definition of something. And the reason why I know that's what happened is because the governor was not happy with the finished product of the bill. People were upset that it had so many hurdles in it, but he wasn't happy with the finished product either. And so he actually had to go to the Florida Supreme Court to ask them to, in my lifetime here in Florida, would have just asked the Attorney General for their legal opinion of what sentence was. And then someone had to remind him, no, some first year freshman Democrat Attorney General the same question, and she kind of screwed herself on it because she just went ahead and publicly commented that we don't comment on pending legislation or pending litigation, and we all knew this was going to end up being litigated after it was legislated. So now she can't issue legal opinions anymore.
Wow.
Yeah. So on this bill, to answer your question, the House, the Senate is a much better place to be in. What you guys read and see, I don't necessarily know that's going to be the finished product at all.
Okay, so the hope is
I'm a little hesitant about, and I'll individually talk to people all the time, but I don't really want to give, or offer up a reason or excuse for the governor's office or anybody to say that I would be fair and impartial if something's heard. I have my feelings about it, but you don't hear judges talk about cases before they come to their courtroom, or prosecutors or defense attorneys, unless it's, for their client. But I just don't want to give anybody an easy reason to say, see, he can't be fair. And what happens is bills get re-referenced. They get sent to other committees. And I will tell you, it's just not the likelihood. It's just the reality that there's so few of us who chair as Democrats committees, especially something like this, that if it goes to another committee chair or committee, it's not going to get real scrutiny.
Right. Right. So you, in a sense, you have to be quite careful because, they can pull the rug from underneath you, given they have the majority, right?
Yeah, like I had some people that you and I both know, that everybody here knows, like, you should just refuse to hear it and resign as chairman. Okay, you guys will all think I'm really cool for 15 minutes. But you know what happens when that happens? You'll never get bills heard that a Republican chair would never hear. Okay, you'll never, last week we heard a hate crimes bill, like I said, that relates to gender ID. Do you think a Republican chairman of criminal justice would ever hear a hate crimes bill that has to do with gender ID?
Absolutely not.
Would a Republican chair ever hear a bill on trans rights? No. But, I got to, and we get to. And the bill passed the committee, by the way, because we had a real conversation, and I called out some people from having some real old fashioned thoughts and feelings about things and just got it out there, and it passed.
Well, I mean, that's really good to hear. Okay. So, I mean, I perfectly understand your position. So I definitely appreciate you laying that out. Now, just to kind of circle back, if HB1 in its, let's say in its current form, or even in a somewhat modified form, does end up passing, would there be, in your eyes, a way to challenge it in either state or federal court?
Yeah, so Amendment 4, even though it was less bad than the original draft, was always heading to a legal challenge, right? So the ACLU knew from day one that if we wrote anything on a piece of paper and it was presented, that it would that it would be legally challenged. So that's a no-brainer. So yeah, I would expect, actually, strategically, some people would argue that the worse a bill is, the more constitutionally infirm it is, the better chance it has of being struck down. So, there's some theory that's like, don't try to make it not smell as bad as it perhaps a particular bill smells, because it'll have a better chance of being struck down. What the bill doesn't have, and I know this is being recorded, but I trust no one's going to go out and tell the other side and tip them off, is the following. Every lease that you guys have ever signed, every contract that you've ever signed for anything, whether it's your cell phone or an apartment, has what's called a severability clause. Okay. And that means that of the above 10 sections that are in this document, if any one of them are found to be unlawful or unenforceable, the rest will still survive. So if your landlord says that you're responsible for plumbing repairs, and all of a sudden, the legislature decides in their infinite wisdom to say plumbing repairs are always the landlord's responsibility, well, that part of your lease is now, by operation of law, unenforceable or unlawful, actually, if the landlord tries to enforce it. But that doesn't mean the other 9 parts about pets, security deposit, when rent is due, where you would resolve a dispute, radon gas warnings and lead paint, but all the other bits survive. This bill doesn't have a severability clause. Please, nobody say anything. Because if there's one part that's not good, the whole thing is not good. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. And I really appreciate you pointing that out, because that actually is to our favor. Because if a court does strike it down, it'll strike down the entire thing.
Yeah. So like there's one part of the bill that I don't mind talking about, like objectively, that I have a problem with just the plain reading, whether a 5-year-old or 50-year-old would read it. And it has to do with the civil liability of municipal officials. If there's a disagreement about issues with police departments, it's just the way it reads is just doesn't pass, any type of scrutiny, whether it's intermediate, rational basis, or strict.
Now, have you spoken to any of your Republican colleagues who might take issue with, for example, with the bill, on the basis that it transfers power of municipalities to control their budget, their police department budgets, over to the state?
So that
actually,
yeah. So that section is, and remember, I wasn't joking when I said I'm a little nerdy when it comes to bills. Like, I play chess with these things and not checkers. So there are things you read it and you go, oh my God. And you can think of an instant example or hypothetical as to why something's so bad, or maybe perhaps so good, depending on what side you're on, right? But there are things that I know, I get the talking points and I get people's emails and text messages and Instagram and Twitter tweets and all that stuff, because it has this part and this part. And I'm like, yeah. So here's an example about the budget thing, the budget section. That actually already exists for sheriffs, for county sheriffs. So that whole appeal process has been in law for a long time. As it relates to sheriffs, they're just replicating the language now, but allowing not only on a police municipal level, but they're also allowing a private citizen to come forward and do that petition to what's called the administrative commission. That actually already exists for sheriff's departments. They actually have to submit their budget, and it's subject to what's called the administrative commission on that. So that's not, while that section might also suck, it's not a new and novel idea. I floated a gun bill a couple of years ago because I don't think 13 and 14-year-olds should be on social media with firearms. I don't know. I just, it's per se illegal because they're not hunting or target shooting. And when I came out with a draft of my bill, people were freaking out about it. And I'm like, guys, what you're freaking out about a section that I just copied and pasted from an existing statute that's 27 years old. Like the NRA was freaking out. I'm like, you guys weren't freaking out about this for 27 years. What I've drafted is already in the law. So I want to be careful sometimes about, where is the best place to push or push back. And what sections are the best in any bill to amplify. This is one of a few horrible bills that are in the legislature.
No, yeah. I mean, I expect that the activist community here in Dade, at least, that I've spoken to many activists. I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of pressure to get HB1 defeated. So that will be our hope that it does, and if it doesn't, that at least maybe it'll get taken up with courts. So now moving on to the other really bad bill among the many, SB 90. So the Miami-Dade Democratic Party, whom we have a couple of delegates here, a couple of steering committee members here, has been pushing a big campaign to pressure not just, the entire Democratic delegation I expect is for statewide is going to be against SB 90, but specifically to pressure also Senator Ileana Garcia, among others, because that bill will actually be removing voters from the voter rolls from a vote by mail, which would basically delete the hard work that myself and thousands of canvassers have done to try to get people to participate, right? So I wanted to get your thoughts on SB 90 and what your expectation is for how that bill will turn out.
So this is yet another subject where you almost have to pinch yourself sometimes and be like, hold on a second. I could have sworn I just saw a self-serving video clip of the governor saying that elections in Florida are rock solid and awesome and there's no problem, and said so on Tucker and on Neil Cavuto and Fox and Friends. And didn't he just say that we run an amazing ship with no fraud and no problems, and we're on time and everything's great, and we allow for ballots to be counted and we don't have to wait until election day? And well, then what's the problem? Have any of you guys, by a show of hands, ever seen A Few Good Men with like Tom Cruise and Jack Nicholson? Anyone ever see that movie? Okay. All right. So you remember the scene where he's like, Colonel, if you gave the order and your orders are always followed, why did you have to transfer PFC Santiago off the base? Okay. So you can't have it both ways. Listen, even on HB1, I keep a 27-second clip on my phone at the ready to show people where he goes on Tucker Carlson, and Tucker Carlson says, Governor, let me ask you, how many warehouses were burned down? How many homes and businesses were destroyed from riots since the spring and summer of last year in your state of Florida? And he goes, no, Tucker, that doesn't happen here. We have law and order. We have people that are respected. I have the National Guard at the ready. And what you saw happen in Minneapolis and happen in Portland and places like that does not happen here in Florida. So why do you need to enhance criminal penalties for these riots that are getting out of hand in your state that you say don't exist? So about the SB 90 is the same thing. You were bragging about how great and efficient elections are here in the state of Florida. You said there was no evidence of fraud. Everybody was counted efficiently and promptly. What's the reason? Please show me the reason. And that's like where you just want to go to the videotape. The other issue, and I just actually, before I jumped on with you guys, was talking to the Northeast Democrats, because that's, hometown for me. And, they're also talking about SB 90. They go, listen, your biggest ally and surrogate sort of in this pushback is actually the supervisor of election, Christina White, okay, who I talk to a lot, through, late night and early morning, especially when sites are down and there's questions and there's concerns, and we'll go to like polling places to make sure nobody's being bullied or there's anything nefarious going on. Some parts of my district are pretty fun to watch. There's a lot of theater, but like she's a huge advocate, and I don't even know what her political persuasion is. I think she might be NPA, she might even be Republican, whatever. But ask the supervisor of election, are you seeing a lot of problems with fraud or issues as it relate to people that, opt for vote by mail and have a period of time? Do you think we need to lessen that? And quite frankly, what you're saying to her and asking her rhetorically is, do you want to do a hell of a lot more paperwork each and every single year now? Or is the system the way that is okay? And here's the thing, a lot of supervisors of election statewide are Republicans who will tell you the system's fine. Unless, of course, they think they can get a lot more funding if this bill goes to it. So when you look at a bill like this, look for the fiscal, okay? It'll be found in the bill analysis. And if it costs $25 million or $80 million or $100 million statewide to implement this, coming off of a year where the governor has told each one of his agency heads that you need to find 6% savings or more and cut back, and all commercial property tax revenue is going to be down at a municipal and county level, are you really asking us to go spend X numbers of millions of dollars statewide just because you want an annual redo and re-up on this? That doesn't make fiscal sense. Especially, it would make sense and it would be worth it, whatever the cost was, if rampant fraud was happening. But sir, you yourself, as the executive said that if every state was run like Florida's elections, and then, go off on your weird, wild theories about election fraud in other states. But hey, everything's great here.
Right. Definitely appreciate that, because, that, again, myself and so many people spent so much time registering voters, getting people to vote by mail, doing voter education, right? How to vote, where your precinct is, all that stuff, which unfortunately is not made as simple or as readily available as perhaps, it should be. And this bill is like a slap in the face to the hard work that, thousands upon thousands of people have committed to over the last, over the last years. So we definitely would like to see it defeated. Now, is it your expectation that that bill will get defeated as a result of some pushback?
I mean, look at an example. All of last year, we were one of the only states that didn't meet for special session during COVID. Okay. And speaking to like Republican members that we serve with, I'm like, are you guys really not going to sign on coming back for special session? And when I came back here to Tallahassee, April 22nd, we stayed for, I think we went home for a couple of days in June and then came back again. Like I spent, I think, only 41 days home in all of 2020. And I would reach out to like some of our Republican colleagues and I'm like, are you really not like, so this is one of those bills where I'm like, are you really like in favor of this? Like, we're all here because the process worked in your favor. It worked out. You won, right? It worked. It worked. Listen, I make no bones about it. I make jokes. I don't mean to be like sort of insensitive, but I've run against people who have very questionable practices when it comes to campaigning, right? So I had to work that much harder to get a much higher margin, if that makes sense. But everybody needs to understand, you're all in the place where you got voted into. So you all, and this is something I would say on the floor, there must be a lot of you that have serious concerns about a primary or a general election coming up, that you need to do what you need to be able to say those things and not be afraid to say those things. But I will tell you, behind the scenes, a lot of the bills that you guys have concerns with, the Republicans mostly think they suck too. It's just a question of whether or not they have the political will to push back.
That's very good to hear. Although the second part of your statement, Republicans having political will to push back, unfortunately, not always the case. Now, that being said, I did also want to give you, a little bit of a floor to kind of talk about some good bills that are coming on. Any bills in particular that you've been working on? You mentioned the transgender hate crime bill. Are there any other good bills that we should be made aware of?
Yeah, there are. Well, I mean, for good results or to produce, good things. A lot of people, some people come up here and, they want to, this is fun for people. This is the coolest, like this, they're living their best life. Right. And then there's some of us that, like there's a group, Senator Tadeo, part of the day delegation that she was on, the last meeting, she's another person who doesn't like file fluff, if that makes any sense, right? She, not fluffy things that are like, nice pleasantries. And a couple of my Republican colleagues, like Senator Jeff Brandes, who's actually my roommate in Tallahassee. He flew back today, but like nobody is more, I mean, every Democratic caucus member will tell you that nobody has led the charge for criminal justice reform more than that guy. Okay. He has like 40 bills filed, all of which I hope to hear, that increase gain time in prisons, that remove minimum mandatories, which are completely disparate in their application. Nobody, conditional and compassionate release for nonviolent offenders. Like, let's let the 70-year-old marijuana, convictions, let's let them out. Okay. I mean, this is ridiculous. And so it's interesting where you find allies or where you find people. Now, sometimes the argument has to be economic, and sometimes the argument is ideological or philosophical. Sometimes things cost a lot of money, but it's the right thing to do. In my first term, in my first session, I filed a bill to provide tampons and feminine hygiene products to female inmates. Now, that gives everybody the giggles, but really, honestly, it was effective that as a former prosecutor, I stood up there and I said, listen, there's a social contract here that we must live up to. This isn't about being punitive and just punishing. If we expect rehabilitation, if we expect people to reenter into society, they have to feel some value, that there's some buy-in, okay? That we actually have basic human decency for one another, because you're punishing them and then tasking them that when they reenter society, we expect you to do everything that you're supposed to do. Well, you just treated me like shit for the entire time that you warehoused me somewhere in a facility, okay? So don't expect. So the first session was feminine hygiene products. Last session, people were like, is this really necessary? There was like one incident that we heard about. I didn't want pregnant inmates shackled anymore behind the back or placed in solitary confinement. Sure enough, at the exact same county jail, North Broward Bureau, under Sheriff Tony's watch, at the exact same facility, Tammy Jackson was the first, and then Stephanie, a 28-year-old woman, gave birth again, basically in solitary confinement with no medical attention, the exact same facility within a year. So
Horrible.
Is that a good bill? No, I think it has a good result. 2 years ago, I filed a bill during states of emergency. Okay, talk about weird coincidence, maybe pre-staging. During states of emergency, that you cannot be evicted. I filed that in October of 2019, before you and I ever heard of COVID. 2 years ago, I filed implicit bias training, that police officers and law enforcement have to take implicit bias training 6 months before George Floyd happened. And so I don't care if sometimes, when you were talking about how the governor spun the whole January 6th riot as the reason for this bill, okay? When you have a good bill that does something good, I don't care what excuse people have to give it to get it passed. If it's something good, whatever resonates with people, if it's well-intended, if it's a good bill. If it's a bad bill, they'll grasp at straws and try to spin it and change dates and, revisionist history on some things. But if it's a good bill, I don't care what taps into people's, interest or to get them to vote yes on. So I filed an eviction moratorium bill again this year, and people are like, this is awesome. This is amazing. Yes, this is great because of COVID. I'm like, no, it's not because of COVID. But okay, if you vote yes, I don't care why. You know what I mean? It's fine. I also want to increase access to county facilities as well. I love animals. I have a really soft spot for animals, especially dogs. I'm allergic to cats. Otherwise, I would love cats more. But, you know, I think veterinarians should have to report when they suspect animal abuse. And right now they don't, which is bizarre to me. And guess who's fighting back against it? Veterinarians. Very strange. Multifamily complexes, we have a lot of protections for condos because some boards, you know, run rampant and things like that. A lot of, I grew up in the housing business, so affordable housing is another issue. Everyone's painting the doom and gloom about the state budget and the shortfall. However, 389,000 new people have called Florida home last year, and so home sales were off the charts. Okay, home sales were off the charts. So what actually funds the Sadowski Fund? Documentary stamps from mortgage notes recorded and the sale of property. The Sadowski Fund is overloaded with funding and should not be rated and should not be swiped up again. But those are one of those things, Adrian, where a lot of people campaign using the buzzwords like affordable housing. We need affordable housing. A lot of people don't know what the hell that means. They don't understand how tax credits, you know, and the permit fees are paid up front before a shovel goes in the ground. So as long as people aren't embarrassed and you're willing to meet one-on-one with people, you can get them to that place. But I would expect you are going to have some pleasant surprise from Republicans.
So I'm gonna
and some bad news, of course, that you expect.
I really appreciated you going over that. I had no idea about the veterinarians not needing to report animal abuse. That's you know, it's one of those things that you kind of assume to kind of be like a no-brainer. But the fact that it's not on the books, it's also like evictions during a state of emergency.
Also,
yeah. Speaking, our period fundraiser was very successul. We just completed.
I know. I agreed to match you, so I owe you $1,062 for diapers.
Well, we would definitely greatly appreciate that.
No, not about giving you the 1,062, but about.
Yeah, no, don't worry. We got the joke. Don't worry. Okay. But yeah, I mean, we were very, very happy how that resonated with the community. I know Period actually does do a lot of fundraising for female inmates as well. So it goes very much in line with what you're working on. Now I have one last question. Then I'm going to open it up to Q&A from anyone else participating. Are you okay with time, by the way? Do you have another 20 minutes?
Yeah, no, we're good. We're good.
It's been said many times that Miami-Dade basically it funds Tallahassee, right? We pay more in taxes than we actually get back in terms of resources and in terms of you know, money and public investment. What do you think is a viable long-term strategy that perhaps the Democratic delegation can start thinking about to sort of get Miami-Dade to have more of a resource say in terms of how the budgets are actually.
So it's reciprocity and parity is really like we should have the reciprocal benefit of that which we send up. So I'm doing a little bit of like the state of Florida needs to put a ring on this finger this session. Instead of asking for little crumbs like 100,000 for this city and 50,000, I have 15 cities. I have by far the most cities. So there's 34, there's 36 basically villages, but 34 cities in Miami-Dade, and we have Senator Tadeo, Senator Ana Maria Rodriguez, Senator Garcia, Senator Chevron Jones has half his district is Miami, Manny Diaz. And me, so we have a bunch of senators, but I have 15 cities, so I'm totally overweight with the number of cities, 97 elected officials. And each city asks for, like, we need storm help, we need stormwater, we need sanitary, we need this, we need that. And so I'm literally doing the ring on the finger, and I said, listen, I don't want to do any more of these little crumbs projects. I want a big, massive gut check on the state as to whether or not they are really committed to us. And, because people campaign, even this governor, as a Republican governor, on environmentally, I'm environmentally friendly, I'm this and this. Great. So I've submitted about $80 million worth of requests from septic to sewer conversion. And I talked about these things for years, and people used to roll their eyes because it's not sexy. It's not sexy if you're campaigning for something to say, you're going to need to spend $36,000 on your house to remove your septic tank and to tie in the public sewer. That's not sexy to hear. The alternative is your house won't be there in 3 years because the high water table is within 6 inches of drainage fields, right? So this is when I said sometimes there's an ideological argument, sometimes there's an economic one. So this is what I do. I ask the property appraiser, I ask him, frequently. He just sent me the numbers a couple weeks ago. I say, what is the total fair market value for all real estate in Miami? $152 billion. Now, when we said, it's $452 billion in market value. Now, when people see, they get sticker shock. No county mayor or commissioner or city mayor wants to run on that platform because it's expensive. But Danielle Levine Cava was up in Tallahassee last year, and she's like, I'm running outside the office because it would be wrong to do it inside the office. So we're outside, and I'm like, if you commit and you promise to the rip up, repair, and replacement of sanitary infrastructure and septic to sewer conversion, which is not probably what an endorsement, you absolutely have my full commitment. And she's like, absolutely. I'm like, good. It wasn't like, I would like it was take care of the poop. And I know it sounds crazy, but if you have a $20,000 car, you'll spend $200 to fix it, right? If you have a $200,000 house or condo, you'll spend $2,000 to fix it and not risk losing it. So if you have $452 billion worth of real estate paying property taxes, shouldn't you spend $4.5 billion to save it? So that initial number gives people sticker shock, but in relation to what we risk losing, it's de minimis. And those are the terms that people have to think about it. So I'm doing a gut check on the state. And if the state says, go pound sand, we're not giving you any of that money, well, then I know that we're on our own. And I know that we need to go elsewhere to get resources. Concurrently, I've also worked with the small community wastewater treatment program through the DEP to get like 80% funding at 50 basis points for the remaining 20. So we do a lot of stuff behind the scenes. We also have fraud, guys, in Miami-Dade at local levels in many pockets. And these are some of the things I have to juggle, and I have to be careful of conversations. And I know that, it sucks. And we have people that sell fear to get reelected, not solutions, just fear, as if they own that space and they're the only ones that, that can bring a remedy to it. I'm not a Miami native. My Scotch immigrant grandfather was down here in 1919, apparently building buildings that I didn't find out about until a couple years ago and found pictures. But I came down here to go to law school with a very young family and stayed because I just kept getting more in politics. I'm not the grandson or son of anyone important here. There's no legacy interest in my family here. This is all like organic and authentic. And I'm sure I pissed a lot of people off because I love calling people out. And there was a member of the county commission, an important person last year, who announced something at a podium at a press conference because it sounded like a good idea and they needed to do something about gun violence. And then it came up to my office in Tallahassee and I'm like, please tell me you're not here to ask me to try to get the state to pay for that terrible idea that you had. I'm like, well, yeah. A message to teenagers in Miami-Dade County, especially in Black neighborhoods, that the only way you can stay alive is if you hide in your house before the curfew comes. That's not a solution. Okay. That is a really dangerous, psychologically effed up Band-Aid. And I don't want any part of it. Okay. And I basically ended up telling that person to get out of my office. There's 8 people crammed in my office. Okay. And someone says, well, there's conversations certain people have with certain people. I go, do you mean Black people having conversations with Black people? She goes, well, it's just like you Cubans. And I go, I'm not Cuban, ma'am. I'm Irish, Scottish, and Italian from New Jersey. And she goes, oh, well, that's even worse. I go, I'll tell you what. This is the chairwoman of the Miami-Dade County Commission, Audrey Edmondson. I said, there's the door, ma'am. There's the door. Stop selling fear. Bring a solution, okay? And stop peddling fear on people. Don't spend $2 million on billboards telling Black kids they have better street lighting. Why don't you bring vocational training? Why don't you improve the neighborhood? Why don't you do mixed use development and not build housing for the poor in poor neighborhoods? Mix it up. Do mixed income, okay? Kids that live in Overtown's lives would be better off, and my kid's life would be better off and more enriched if they ate over each other's house and spent more time together. Not heard stories about it. As the crow flies 3 miles, the miles would be 3,000 miles away. There's so many people. I'm sorry, I don't mean to go off on the rails here, But there's so many people who are so full of shit to get elected and to cut ribbons and take selfies and get followers and not actually roll up their sleeves and do the dirty stuff, which is the, you know, you guys all saw the Biscayne Bay fish kill, right? And it's bittersweet for me to see that. Okay, it's really bittersweet for me to see that. But that was a wake-up call for people like, why is this happening? Well, the nutrient-rich soil that's going into the water from septic tanks that are leaching basically and runoff and flooding is causing this environmental disaster. I'm sorry it took millions of fish and seagrass to die for you to see it, but this is where we are. So that's a huge issue.
So I'm gonna,
and that's something where if I was running for a higher office, trail. That's a local issue. It's a local problem that I really want to focus on.
And it's not as sexy as something like criminal justice or unemployment, unfortunately. But I do think I know it's very important. Now the last little thing before I give the microphone to Yvette, who's first in line for the questions. Would you like to make any kind of a comment on the Homestead detention facility?
Yeah, we suck at what we do if that's the only option. Okay. Listen, I mean, when someone gets arrested, we're talking. Let's go more extreme. When someone gets arrested for something and a bond has to be set, right? It's to secure their risk. They have nexus or ties to the community. I bet you everybody on this call would volunteer to have somebody crash on their couch for a while instead of being in a detention center. Okay, we can do a lot better.
Excellent. Love it. All right. We have Yvette. Just if you don't mind introducing yourself and then presenting your question. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Yvette Alcoba. I live in Brickell, and I know exactly what you're talking about, and it really concerns me because I feel that it's nonstop growth without taking into account our septic or our sewer system. It's just, so I live next to a building. I live at 2451 Brickell, and Una's owner is now going to make a 80-story building in a 1-acre property. And he's saying that they're going to put a marina where I thought was a moratorium, but that's just one issue. My condo looks at the bridge, and I remember when people would barbecue and park their cars, and now the water's at the level of the trees. So water for me is really, really important. And so I was writing on the chat because Sierra Club just wrote this article that the Orange County residents passed a charter with a majority vote, 81%, so it's nonpartisan, to give the equal rights to the, let me see what it's called, the Little River. And so since you're about rights, why not translate that at the state level so that we can, similar to what Citizens United did for corporations, giving them the right to basically ruin our laws, right? Why don't we take back some of that, or I'm hoping that you'll create a bill basically to give the rights, now that there's the precedent at the local level, give the rights create a law at the state level to give the rights to these waterways. And for us specifically, it would be whatever I wrote, Biscayne Bay, the geez, I don't remember what I wrote. You guys read it.
Oh, listen, and I get the gist of what I get the gist of what you're saying, and we actually do have a bill coming out that we're co-sponsoring that speaks specifically to Biscayne Bay on a number of issues, from anchoring, from runoff, from environmental issues that have to be addressed before construction, and all that stuff. The thing that I see on Brickell, and then there is one little weird interplay, which is sometimes we want the state to step in to help to prevent local abuses of things, and you know, someone's taking care of somebody. I know there's somebody on this call that's very concerned about condo issues, and I've been to their apartment and gone to meetings with friends at other condos. That's one of the bills that I'm filing because there's so much graft and unlawful, unethical stuff going on at the association level. But at the same time, the dynamic.
I wish, that's not me, but okay.
No, I know. No, I got you. But my point is, sometimes we want the state to come in and help, right? So the county is responsible and has control over our beaches until we have really expensive sargassum seaweed coming. Then we want the state's help, okay? Or at the local level, there's local politicians who are granting permits for things that they never should have, and allowing zoning that's completely disproportionate and out of place and inappropriate. And we want the state help. But at the same time, you don't want state preempt. It's called preemption. Over from the local town mothers and fathers, so to speak, because local is supposed to know best. It's when local stuff gets abused that we want a big brother, big sister sort of to come in. Perfect example. If coastal communities want to ban plastic bags and straws and stuff like that, I think they should be able to. But the state is preempted. Yeah, but the state is like preempted that stuff from happening. There are cities that don't want Airbnb everywhere, okay, because they can't control it, or they want to be able to control it locally. There's a bill pending right now from a Miami-Dade state to take over that entire process and licensing and everything for Airbnb. What the hell does an office in Tallahassee know about your neighborhood, okay, or about how things are?
Well, that's a good question. The whole thing with the DBPR and all the licensing, I get very frustrated because they get so much money, right? The DBPR, and then when you turn to them to resolve something, they do absolutely nothing. So where's all that money going? Those millions of dollars of the DBPR.
So I have to apologize because you're actually not in my district. So I'm just going to say this. I'm very selfish when it comes to my constituents. So I get a lot out of these agents that just left because he's very ill. But like I had Halsey Bashir's DBPR secretary come into my district and meet with like 150 residents. I brought down Florida Department of Transportation into my district to get them to pay for really expensive studies on things that they normally wouldn't do. And I don't mean that to be flippant or to be sarcastic, but without blowing certain people up, without blowing certain people up, publicly, behind the scenes, I know the Department of Economic Opportunity unemployment has given great attention to the cases I send them because we've worked sort of closely behind the scenes, and I wasn't like doing it as a gotcha moment. So what I commit to you and promise to do to you, if you reach out to me, I will help you bring pen to paper on your concern and your idea. And if somebody locally is granting permits for marinas and they shouldn't be, and nobody's paying attention or doesn't know what to say or how to fight back, I love getting in good trouble. So please reach out to me.
Yvette. Next we have Yvette. I'm sorry. Yvette. I see. Got you. Okay, sorry about that, Yvette.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. Hi, Senator Pizzo. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. My question is about unemployment. You talked about it during your speech, and I'm so glad you're getting other Republicans to realize how messed up the system is. What I'm interested in seeing in Tallahassee is a bill that would comprehensively address the failures of the unemployment system, because, well, what I've seen in the last few months is a lot of individual politicians trying to connect their constituents to the unemployment system, which is great. Obviously, that's really important. But what I want to see is long-term solutions. We probably need another vendor to do the website because the website is trash. We need probably more staff for the call centers, and lastly, we probably need just more benefits because 600 a week or a month is not enough. Yeah. So is that something you could look into? Is a comprehensive solution?
No. Yeah. So we are, and there's been a lot of talk about some other people have filed bills on it and all that stuff, and that's great, and I'm fully in support of that. But I made it very clear I had to do it on Twitter last week because I was getting asked about it so much that I don't think we can get a bill done correctly without knowing some things. And I don't want to say that there's a lot of people that are paying attention, that ask and whatever, that look into it. But again, I get really nerdy on these things. So there's what's called ISF. It's a company that was hired by DEO to do a third-party audit. But I'm not entirely excited about what their audit's going to say next week in our meeting, because the project lead manager actually worked on the website and in the Scott administration when it was being constructed. What I'm looking for is the Inspector General's report investigation from Melinda Miguel into the origination. Said that we might need, money for a new website or like that. Deloitte is the company that's been demonized and vilified because they're the ones that built the original, but they haven't touched it since May of 2015. They went under contract February 2012, launched it November 2013, tweaked it January 2014. but I know they made policy changes, and tech companies don't make policy changes. Only politicians make policy changes. So I actually want to use our subpoena power and bring them to a committee I sit on, pandemic, and have them explain why the website sucks. I think that they're dying to say what happened and who told them or what happened to make the site not work. They launched 2 other sites concurrently in the same policy changes, which drastically reduces its productivity and efficiency. A couple other things. It's easy to say we want the amount to go up. I think at the very least, it should be minimum wage. At the very least, it should be minimum wage. What does that mean? If we're at $10 an hour, it should be $400 a week at least. Right now, we're at $275 max. It's the system born out of some Keynesian economic theory, probably, where they actually used the trailing third quarter of July, August, and September of the prior year to determine the number of weeks that will extend beyond 12. What the hell does July, August, and September of 2019 have to do with the price anymore in real time? I also have incredible goodwill with companies right now, and I know sometimes, people take positions against corporate welfare, corporate this, corporate whatever, but think about all the large companies that operate in Florida who have lost the goodwill of their employees that have diligently and faithfully worked for them for years. And even those big shot companies couldn't get them unemployment checks. So I think companies also want to step forward. Places like Disney would rather pay the unemployment on behalf of their employees and get reimbursed for it later, which should have been a hell of a lot faster and more efficient than the system that we have now. Also, career source centers, guys, we volunteered to train all of our staff members and ourselves. Everybody did. Senator Tadeo was on board. Chevron Jones was on board. Javier Fernandez, I think Jose Javier Rodriguez as well. We were all on board to volunteer to go work for DEO. We were already state employees. We've already passed background checks. So the first week in April, I volunteered, and the director was like, no, our lawyer says no. I go, why, dude? We have 160 of us, 120 House members, 40 senators, 160 legislators, centrally located offices through every section of the state. We can handle ID verification, employment verification, fraud. We can do all of this. And there was a real pushback against it. So I have a draft filed of an unemployment bill. I do. It's just a lot more, it's going to be a lot more, I don't want to say complicated, but it's going to have a lot of stuff in it. And so the short answer is yes, but we have to have an informed way. And I have the commitment from the committee that we're going to hear from all of these people.
So on the website, to be clear, you think that Deloitte had a lower quality website specifically for Florida?
I know that when our population was 18,900,000 in 2012, when they were under contract, that the state of Florida asked only for a capacity to accommodate 775 users at once.
Wow.
That's gross negligence to me. Why didn't you go for the gold or platinum option? We're the third largest state in the country. In what capacity would you think only 775 people would want to use it? And then after the website was launched, this is what I'm really excited about getting to in a committee meeting. After the website was launched, Deloitte told me and the Senate president that there were policy changes that were made to the website. Now, I presume that means Rick Scott and his administration, okay? But what I do know is they were defendants in a lawsuit, and February 16th, just the other day, there was a motion to dismiss. So they're not really going to speak publicly about anything until they feel free to say something that won't be used against them in some litigation. So I'm looking for that to be over as soon as possible, and then get into the committee and say, the entire state of Florida thinks that your website sucks.
I look forward to it. Thank you, Senator.
You got it.
Thank you, Brian. All right, next we have Jude, who is our political engagement director for the
Jude Bruno.
For the Miami-Dade Young Dems. Jude, please go ahead.
Senator, thank you for being with us this evening. I will again reiterate, it is a disappointment that you will not be running and being part of that conversation. But I do understand work is unfinished, and as someone who wants to finish what he has started, I can relate.
You said
I was.
You didn't even put the ED. You just said, I am shocked.
Listen, I'm still shocked.
I read all of these stuffs, guys. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm glad you do. Three quick questions because you mentioned some points.
Sure.
As you know, housing did pick up in the state of Florida. It most certainly did, but it picked up and it shed a light on for those that are my age, young families, young Miamians, young Floridians, to be able to purchase a home, let alone, let's say, a 2-bedroom. You really are priced out in this community where you really have to consider, going out of state or going much, much further away from what you have known to be your center for majority of your life. What can we do about that to be able to help first-time home buyers? I know there's a lot of programs, but you got to put something down, and even when you put something down, you still can't get close to the dream home that you want.
It's a very important, critical issue. Now, politicians will brag about this is how great our state is. See, look at all the things that we did, and now everybody wants to move to our state. Well, the problem is that our supply is a lot lower when the demand increases. But I'll tell you, not even anecdotally, in January of last year, not to kill the buzz of the funny LOLs that are going on in the chat right now, but in January of last year, I got interrupted out of a committee meeting and pulled out because FDLE and the state attorney's office intercepted a call of an inmate who paid $47,000 to have me killed, and how my body was to be chopped up and where it was to be taken, and with explicit instructions, including my chief of staff, who was a prosecutor with me. It was a guy who was accused of molesting his 2 daughters, and he thought, because he was a former police officer, that I would testify against people in the community. So he paid $47,000 to have me killed, and a specific location on Chrome Avenue where it was to go. Well, I'm at a committee meeting and my wife's at work, and it's 3:25 p.m. I think it was, and my kids are home by themselves. So I FaceTime them real quick. I'm like, out the back door, Howard and Joelle's, the next door neighbors, now. They didn't answer. They didn't say a single thing because this happened when they were 6. I had 2 armed juveniles follow me home from juvenile court, posted on Facebook and brag about how they were to get this mother effer. And so we had to get them out of the house back. They're good, tough kids, and they understood. So I pulled them out and I rented a condo down the street in Sunny Isles Beach. So we sold the house. I can't afford to buy that same house back. I can't afford to go back to the same house where my kids were finally happy they had a house after I was done being a prosecutor. So what we need to do is mix up housing. Now, there are genuine concerns about gentrification, taking over neighborhoods and all that stuff, displacing people from, culturally, racially, ethnically, there's all those things. But we know what we don't do in Florida that we do everywhere else in the world as a best practice. We don't, as I said in the beginning of this, we don't put mixed income projects in places. So my family actually builds these things in the Northeast where we'll build a 100-unit building, and we have seriously low subsidized units inside of the same building where we have free market. But we don't want to there's some people who do this, but my dad always insisted you can't point to any part of the building to say that's where the poor kids live and that's where the rich kids live, right? Now, we don't have to displace people. We should not be displacing people. I slipped a little one part of a sentence independent clause into a bill a couple of years ago that nobody noticed until I brought it up locally. And I slipped this little line in there that says, cities and counties may require a developer to provide affordable housing on site and can get a density bonus for it. Because what's been happening? Some big project is announced. The city commissioner, district commissioner, whatever, for the city, the county, whatever, get some huge payday into a penalty slush fund. They'll pay for parades or turkeys or some bullshit, whatever, but they're not actually helping with the affordable housing that should be on that site, right? They're paying something else in lieu of actually doing it. I slipped this little line there. We insisted that it stay in. That they wanted to go with the House version. Senator Tom Lee had it. I'm like, Tom, hold your ground, man. This is important. This will hold people in check, especially public officials. So now, if somebody goes at 2451 on Brickell, where Yvette was just saying before, take a piece like that. If they get 100 units to the acre, The city can give them 120 units as long as they build 10 or 15 affordable housing units inside of that building as a density bonus. I'm fine with that. But that doesn't get done. Do you guys know how many units the city of Miami actually owns that are affordable? 0. Do you know how many millions of dollars they've collected off new projects that should have had affordable housing, but they've made a payment instead of? A lot. Do you know that we have 9,000 homeless kids, K through 12, in Miami-Dade County? Homeless kids. Do you know that up to 1,100 Miami-Dade full-time enrolled Miami-Dade college students are homeless, right? We need much greater supply. The holdback that we get, the pressure that we get is sometimes local. The problem I have with the Sadowski Fund too is if the first $1 million that goes out to somebody pays fees and permit fees and basically paperwork, not putting a shovel in the ground. So we can have the low-hanging fruit is for cities to waive some of those fees. It's serve a greater public good to have affordable supply in the marketplace than it is to put more money into a slush fund coffer that'll get blown on some bullshit parade when the next Super Bowl comes to town. Absolutely. Absolutely. That's political will. And there's people in certain neighborhoods that are NIMBY, not in my backyard, that don't want things built in their backyard. It makes everyone better. It works in Manhattan, okay? It works well in Manhattan. That the people who clean apartments live sometimes 3 blocks away from the apartment that they clean. We don't have that in Florida. We have haves and have-nots. We have fences and waterways and large walls and all that stuff. But I'm telling you, my kids are better off by living with kids that would otherwise not be in that neighborhood. We need to stop saying this is where affordable housing goes. Why doesn't affordable housing go in some nice cities?
Yes. Yeah.
Completely agree with you, Senator. And one of the projects that the MDYD has will be addressing that, that Adrian and I will be announcing later. So my next 2 questions are Spitfires. You are in unique position. I think one of the very first persons to have commented on your announcement was Nikki Fried, our Agriculture and Consumer Services Commissioner, who is rumored, highly favored, and highly anticipating, most likely will be running.
Oh, she's right. She's right.
But understanding there are others that will have expressed their interest, as we know, Charlie Crist. What is your science?
I spent an hour on the phone with him, 49 minutes on the phone with him the other night.
I hope you were telling him not to.
Listen, he's genuinely concerned that, when districts get redrawn, they're going to draw it in a very Republican friendly manner, and he might be drawn out of his district. So I also think he like other Democrats has a genuine disregard for the job that's being done by the executive now. I mean, I don't find that to be not authentic, but I think there's some stuff. Listen, I like Nikki Fried a lot, but she's in a position where she may get a serious challenge from the Republican side for her own seat. And if I'm Nikki Fried's consultant, priest, rabbi, sister, or mother, I might say, listen,
go big or go home.
If you're just as likely to maybe lose your election as an incumbent in your existing position, better you finish a close second in a gubernatorial race than an ag race, right? I don't remember who lost the last election for agriculture commissioner, but you know who lost the last race for governors, especially in large states and getting a national profile. So she's right. She has to run. I'm
with you, but what will be your science in terms of endorsing? Because I know it may be an open field, it may not. We don't, it's still early. But what will be your science for hitting the doors, the pavements, not making phone calls, donating?
So Jude, and I know you know this, there's a huge difference between viability and electability, right? So if we get a crowded 10-person primary, someone can eke out a win with a plurality vote of 24, 25%. And that person who is the outlier, who's viable in a primary because maybe so many other people came to center or went far left or whatever, wherever they sort of grouped into the median, they're not the mean, but the median sort of area where it bubbled in the primary, somebody who escapes victorious with a small plurality is the one that's going to get creamed in the general. That's the reality. And I'm not one for incremental change either. I'm all about rip off the scab, let's go, don't do things half-assed. But at the same time, I also, listen, Joe Biden was not my number one pick. I wasn't terribly excited. I wasn't jumping up and down. I wasn't like, yes. I wasn't enthralled with the enthusiasm that my dad was at 18 volunteering for John F. Kennedy. And not even remotely as hopeful as he was for Bobby that followed, not even remotely. However, I'll take him over Trump, right? And that's incremental, and sometimes it sucks, and sometimes it's a bit of a compromise, I guess. But who's viable, perhaps, is probably not electable. And, when you joked about, I hope you told Charlie not to run, whatever, there are 3.8 million NPAs who contributed to the delta that spread between 117,000 to 371,000 margin for Trump between 2016 and 2020. And I don't think it wasn't necessarily because we weren't socialist enough that we lost, that the margins increased by 200,000. Or I don't think it was because we weren't, whatever enough that the margins increased. What the hell happened? Right?
That's a good point.
And yeah, Charlie, I said this to him the other night, like think 2 or 3 times. You're like the grown up in the room, but you're not like incredibly exciting. But listen, people had a lot of criticism about Manny Diaz taking over the Florida Democratic Party, right? But he's like on a singular mission and I did not endorse. My endorsement was conspicuously absent because I asked for just a 1-pager of bullet points about what the plan was. And I never got it. And 6 people came after me like, please, we need your endorsement. I go, listen, guys, I just need a 1-pager. I promise you, I'm not a flaring out star in the party or in politics. I'm going to be around and I can garner resources. Just give me a 1-pager. Couldn't get it. I said, listen, you guys have a bunch of endorsements. Perhaps mine is becoming less important. And I know I'm probably being stubborn by asking for a 1-page of his platform, but I'm going to take a pass. And you know what? I can make phone calls and raise $50 million. That was stupid. That was really.
Sorry, last one?
Yeah, Senate Bill 48 is somewhat creeping up a little bit. I believe it doesn't have a House companion yet, but it stands to dramatically change or to merge together the many educational vouchers that's presently on the books. How can we ensure that our public schools can survive and by getting the bill passed or working around the bill should it pass? Because as you know, Miami-Dade, we are the largest in the state, and we stand to lose a lot should this bill pass.
We do. We do stand to lose a lot. However, sometimes this is one of those issues where I think we have an expectation of how people feel, but that might not actually entirely reflect reality sometimes. So my district actually has a very high participation in alternative schools or schools of choice. I think it's now in excess of 30%. I have a lot of Jewish day schools. I have a lot of, pastors that have opened up schools and stuff like that. And there are parts of my district where moms want to get their kids the hell out of the school that they're in and go somewhere else. It is unfathomable to me that a beautiful campus and facility like Booker T. Washington High School, I think at last count is at 46% capacity. Why? The place looks like a university. I mean, it's an awesome campus. This is yet another one of those bills where I think it was kind of thrown out there a little bit to just gain leverage on some other issues. If that makes any sense. There is some like, you gotta be freaking kidding me parts of bills like this. Listen, there's another bill basically to take down unions, the same unions that would, to serve to protect the collective bargaining and for teachers especially. So yeah, it's grouping them all together. The reality is they have the votes. They do have the votes. There are some Democrats in certain sections that will vote no, but won't scream no. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So we've now hit the 9:30 mark. Senator, how are you with time? Oh,
We're good. I'll reheat my sandwich. Don't
Okay, I
worry
just
about
want to make sure. So we have 4 more people ahead. I'll just ask the remaining to try to keep your questions as to the point as possible. Next, we have.
No, it's not their fault. I give really long-winded
It's all
answers.
right.
It's not their fault.
We
Questions are
appreciate you
standard.
nerding out with us. You know, a lot of us are nerds too. So next we have David, who is our political affairs director. And
Thanks, Adrian. Honestly, I'm gonna pitch a pretty easy softball. I was just gonna ask, aside from the bills that you've mentioned, the septic bill, well, we've gone through a number now. Are there any in particular that may be in committee that might have a good chance of actually making it to being law, that might pass the legislature but might not be signed by the governor? Any particular bills that you think that are worth our knowing on the positive side? Bills that we might want to look into as an endorsement, something that we would actually.
You know, you think that's a softball question, and it's not.
Attempt.
So I got this plaque last year from the Florida League of Cities, and people are like, "Wow, that you got their highest award, Defender of Home Rule. What bill?" I go, "It wasn't for any bill I passed. It was for the 5 really bad ones that I helped kill." If things are okay and everything's copacetic, you don't need a bill on certain things. So when you say, like, you know, a softball that you guys can get excited about, yeah, I would love if we start recognizing civil rights across the board. I would love it if we got buy-in from agencies and from different departments to agree on the protection of people and not further exacerbate divides. But you know, you're an immigration attorney, so you may remember SB 168 from a couple of years ago, which basically codified what our deportation and detainment policy was already. But I fought like hell to get in a little amendment that was to protect victims and witnesses of serious violent felony crimes that are raped and robbed, because I don't want 15-year-old Haitian American or Venezuelan girls afraid to talk to the police because they're afraid they're going to be deported individually to get that in. So there's going to be, I would ask that you guys, for whatever appetite and capacity you have, to read the really bad stuff, but read it in its entirety and read the good stuff, and then do a compare and contrast to what's left in bills at the end, what actually makes it out. And I actually think that last couple of years, I was actually pretty effective with talking to the governor's office about not signing bad bills into law. So a couple of them did not survive. There was one that was going to make cities have to shell out large sums of money to basically redo their master comprehensive plan review for a completely innocuous issue about property rights. But yeah, I mean, there's really good stuff proposed, but we are on the defensive. I don't want anyone to be delusional. We are on the defensive completely, and bills that you guys might be really excited about or ideas may never even get a hearing. And so the softball question you thought you were going to give me is actually the toughest one I've gotten all night.
Thank you for that, Senator. So next we have Aaron Parnas, who is he is the issues chair for the Miami-Dade Democratic Party. He's the steering committee for the DEC, a newcomer and an MDYD active member.
Hi, Senator. Thank you so much for coming on the call tonight. I'm also an attorney, and I work a lot with the Florida Justice Center with expunging the criminal records of protesters from the George Floyd protests. And I wanted to ask you, you talked a lot about criminal justice reform that can be done from the state level. But what do you think, as a former prosecutor, can be done on the local level, whether it's in the prosecutor's office or in jails or in the public defender's office, that we can do here without waiting for Tallahassee to act?
So that's a very good question. Mayor Cava actually reached out because she wants to do something about before. A lot of the incidents and tragedies that we see actually are at county facilities. And I can say something that might sound even a little corny, but connecting with people almost like on a best buddy system as it relates to families that are going through this goes back to also sort of the neighborhood feeling, right? I mean, you guys have all at least seen a TV show or a movie, if you're not engaging with your actual neighbors, where like some emergency happens in your house So your mom takes the other kid and brings it over to the neighbor's house so they can go deal with the emergency. Do you follow what I'm saying? You know what I mean? You've seen that before. Like, hey, I got to drop off little Cindy here because I need to go take care of whatever, emergency happened. We don't do that. We don't do that. Who is your top 3 list of people that you would call in an emergency? And are they within 10 or 15 minutes of your place of residence at most? No. And so if you want to foster really good relationships, what are some of the things that bother you? Like, by show of hands, is are police conduct issues of concern? Raise your hand if that stuff is of concern to you, right? Now keep your hand up if you took your driver's license down to your local police department over the past few weeks and gave it to the front desk sergeant so you can do a ride along for a shift and sit in the patrol car in the passenger seat for the entire 8-hour shift and have a conversation with a patrol officer and have an intimate conversation with a patrol officer about race, ethnicity, about crime, about bias. All of you are completely entitled to do it. I do it all the time. It's freaking fascinating. You go to each and every single lights and sirens response, whether it's domestic violence, a shooting, a traffic accident, a robbery, anything, you're with them for the entire shift. You want to see a police officer really open up and tell you what they're afraid of and what they think about, and you want to have an opportunity to have a one-on-one conversation where you get right in that person's face and see how you do it. Choose Friday or Saturday nights, the 11 to 8 a.m. shift. It's the best, especially if you like coffee and donuts. But that's critically important. So when you say at a local level, Aaron, wherever you live, whatever city you live in, okay, is going to have however many police officers per capita, okay? If you're comfortable telling me, what city do you live in?
I'm in Brickell.
Okay. City of Miami Police Department, Friday, Saturday night shift, get in the car. If that's an issue that's of concern to you, get in that patrol car in the passenger seat the entire shift and have real conversations. If you do it once a month, that word spreads, those conversations spread. They're going to bring you things that you didn't think about, that they want to talk about, that they'd like to, that they don't know how. I have police officers that tell me they would love to, when they're going through the academy, they wish they were assigned to pick up little kids from their homes and take them to school or take them home so they can develop relationships, because there is zero communication and connection right now in the community whatsoever. And if all of a sudden you have these patrol guys who might be originating from another city with no connection to the community, but you started installing a system where they actually know these kids, like personally, as they're growing and as they're coming up, people don't get so rough with people. Words are exchanged and not physical actions. De-escalation, one needs to know about. It's how do you do that? You know that there are some people you're related and have relatives that some people might be afraid of at first blush, but you know exactly how to talk to them and you know they're a teddy bear, right? Mm-hmm. Those relationships have to be fostered because right now they're so exacerbated. If that's something of interest to you, if you would like to help feed people, I have plenty. I mean, if you want to work on housing issues and get a consortium of people together on truly affordable housing and moving the needle of forcing the hand of local politicians not to collect payments in lieu, but actually put it towards affordable housing, happy to do it. If you want to talk about why the hell did a guy come to me with like a no-brainer, easy invention that coagulates sand so there's no more erosion and it's de minimis cost, but he's not a preferred vendor of other people, so he can't get a meeting, happy to talk to you about it. If every building that goes up in the Brickell area that she was talking about before doesn't at least like snake fire hose in the parking to collect rainwater so you can retard the discharge out to the streets and not have flooding, which costs nothing and lowers insurance rates, I don't know why we don't have it. Sorry, that was a long answer. But locally, there's so much you can do. You tell me what your passion is, and because I wish I could add more hours to the day or clone myself.
Thank you, Senator.
All right. So just to be super cognizant about time, because I am worried about it, let's do a hard end at 10 p.m. Does that sound good? Is that okay with you, Senator? Okay.
Sure.
So next we have Alexander Kobas. Please give us a brief introduction and present your question.
Hi, my name is Alexander. I'm super interested in politics. I had a question for Senator Pizzo. I want to keep it brief. So I was wondering, I'm interested in having guests for my podcast. Like, how would that work to get in contact with you? Basically, the question is, do you want to be a guest? And if so, how do I, like, who do I have to talk to figure that out?
Okay. And do you have another question?
No, that's it.
Okay. So I follow you on Twitter and you follow me on Twitter. I just DM'd you my cell phone number. Shoot me a text later.
Never ceases to impress me. So thank you, Alex, for your question. Next we have Monica. Monica Moreno, did you have a question? Oh, she's not here.
Nope, she unmuted for a second.
No,
Monica,
I didn't.
There
I
we
was
are.
just raising my hand from earlier that you guys asked to raise your hand for something. I can't remember.
Oh, you used the raise your hand function for that. Okay, no worries. Okay, so next we have Samantha Duran, who's our disabilities coordinator with the Young Dems, and she's also with the Disabilities Caucus. I definitely would love to connect you guys at some other point, Senator. Samantha is very, very good with this stuff. Samantha, please.
Hi. So this is a question in regard to the sub-minimum wage. For those of you who don't know, the sub-minimum wage is a wage in which corporations can legally file under the state to pay people with disabilities under the minimum wage. Sometimes individuals with disabilities are paid as low as 30 cents an hour, if not with just gift cards. So prison labor is not the only form of modern slavery, it's a sub-minimum wage as well. And I was wondering, Senator Pizzo, what you have on your agenda in regard to that, because it's blatant discrimination and it shouldn't exist, considering that people with disabilities benefits only receive $800 a month, which is not a livable wage by any means. So compiled with the sub-minimum wage, we're not giving people with disabilities a living chance.
Compounding that problem even more is those that are on disability. We cap how much they can actually hold.
Yeah.
I think they can't have more than $2,000 at a time because we don't trust them or something, or they're disqualified.
Yeah,
I'm with
that's
you.
what I'm on disability benefits, and
Which is
I can't make more than $1,100 a month. And considering that I only make $800 maximum is ridiculous.
There's actually even a bill proposed by somebody I'm friendly with, and when he filed it and it got published, I was like, "What the hell are you thinking?" So Senator Brandis has actually filed a bill to allow for an adjustment, so when the minimum wage goes up, that there's still people who could be paid less than the minimum wage. Are you familiar with this bill that he filed?
No, but do you know the name of it?
Yeah, I can find it. He filed like 50 bills while we're on here. Hold on a second, I'll find it for you. So, but here's his thinking, and I'll get you the bill number. I'll follow up with you, get the bill number. But here's his thinking: is that unemployment rates are so high in certain demographics that they would only be exacerbated by a rising minimum wage, and that people that might get employment or otherwise get employment will definitely not get it now. So the unemployment rate for returning citizens is already super high. It's too high. And if all of a sudden, the thinking is, well, I've got to pay someone 12, 13, 14 when it goes up to $15 an hour, I might just not hire that person if that's the amount. The other problem is, oh my God, I didn't realize this bothered me. I didn't know. But you have organizations like, I don't want to speak out of turn, but is Anthony Shriver at Best Buddies?
I'm not
Anthony
sure.
Kennedy Shriver. That's like the Kennedy, nephew, whatever. He runs like Best Buddies, whatever. They want to employ a lot of the people that they have at Best Buddies, and they just want them employed. It's not about them making the money. The problem is that if it's an absolute across the board, no consideration whatsoever, no concession, no change, those people won't get jobs.
Huh.
That's the actual concern. So the organizations like Best Buddies, Sergeant Shriver, his father started the Special Olympics. This is John F. Kennedy's brother-in-law, nephew, basically, who now runs Best Buddies. And they want people to work at, and there's a Key Clubhouse, the Key Clubhouse in Miami. Are you familiar with it? Okay, so I've been there a couple of times. I donate to them personally. I donated clothes and all that stuff. And just placing employment for some people is like critically important. They have some functioning disabilities that they want to get people sort of to have that person have, something to do or employment. It's not necessarily probably worth $15 an hour. If you know what I'm saying, if they have to choose between one person or the other, but they're doing their part, sort of contributing to $7 or $8 an hour, but it's just replacement. Your situation, that bothers me so freaking much about the cap. It absolutely. There was a movie on HBO when I was a kid. You guys are way too young. It was called Roger and Virginia, and they wanted to be independent, and they were doing well and successful and wanted to make money, and the entire system and the law just basically held it down. So you are indentured legislatively. It sucks.
Well, it's a state issue, if I'm correct.
Yes. Well, okay, yeah, go ahead.
Well, then I think this is something you should address as well.
I absolutely think this is something that we should address. Are you on disability? Do you get disability benefits?
Yes, but regardless of that, it doesn't matter if someone's
from
on
the state or from the federal government.
Federal. But I'm not talking about the cap on disability benefits. I'm talking about the sub-minimum wage. I mean, I still agree that we shouldn't be capped considering that we make so little, but I'm talking specifically about the sub-minimum wage.
The sub-minimum wage as promulgated by whom? Because Florida's minimum wage is higher than the federal minimum wage.
The sub-minimum wage is in which the state corporations can file with the state to pay people with disabilities below the minimum wage.
And I'm telling you that the biggest push behind that is not particular cases like yours. It's for organizations that push really hard to allow for space for employment for people that would otherwise not be in the workplace at all and not be employable.
I understand.
Yeah.
I understand.
So here's my question to you, because I'm pleading my ignorance on this. Where is the line drawn? Do we want people to fill out tests to see where they are on the scale of things?
Well, I think that people should be entitled to employment regardless of their disabilities. It's the same thing as saying that someone can't work a job just because of their race.
No, Samantha, Samantha, if I have somebody who's severely mentally challenged, okay, and they cannot drive themselves to work, they cannot take public transportation by themselves to work, they cannot live alone, okay? But it's so healthy for them to be in the workplace, even if it's bagging groceries at the end of the aisle at Publix, okay? They're not gonna get hired if it's $15 an hour.
I mean, they're not getting hired now, but if they are getting hired now, they're being paid some minimum wages.
So if I may, Senator, before you go, do you mind posting your contact info in the chat? Because I think that might be something that could be a follow-up discussion.
Sure.
Now, so
can I just ask Samantha, is there one particular job or industry that is of great interest to you where you've seen some resistance or headwinds? Because I would be happy on your behalf to call whatever employer on your behalf.
Oh, for me?
Yeah.
It's kind of complicated because I receive survivor benefits on top of SSI, and survivor benefits counts as part of my actual income. So I'm only allowed to make $440 a month before I lose my cash benefits, which is problematic. So and considering that they would also have to accommodate to my disability, and considering that I have higher education and I do have experience, I don't think people are going to want to accommodate to me and pay me that little and give me those little hours. So I'm just
let me ask the same question another way. Is there a job that you really want that you can't go for, or we're told you can't have because of whatever the caps or the limitations are? These are the
Well,
challenges that I like.
the thing is, whenever I disclose my physical disability in interviews, I just don't get the job. So what I do is I don't tell them in the interviews. And then I get the job. It's always like a thing. I get the job immediately. So I like it's just the ADA not being enforced enough to the point where if you disclose your disability, they just won't hire you. And Florida's an at-will state, so they don't even have to like disclose anything. So yeah, that's it.
All right. Well, I'm going to put, I accidentally just did a direct message to somebody. I apologize. I'm putting my, my email. Who doesn't have my contact info? Who can't get a hold of me? But I'm putting it in.
Yeah, you're definitely the most, and this actually is praise, Senator. You actually are probably the easiest elected official to get in contact with, to compare to any other one, and that actually is praise on my part. Now, the last question of the night would go to Miss Andrea. Please introduce yourself briefly and present your question.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Senator Pizzo, for your time. My name is Andrea, part of Miami-Dade Young Dems recently and part of DC as well. And I have a little Instagram plugging myself, Democracy Dates, where I kind of talk about issues that affect us. And you've commented, and I appreciate your support on that end. So just so I know you're not running for governor, and I am disappointed about that, but I'll get over it. When are you going to officially start campaigning, like actively, to continue your role as a senator? Because you're technically my senator. I live in North Miami Beach, so nice. I would definitely want to participate heavily in your campaign, because you besides the fact that you're easily accessible, you're just a very honest person. And yeah, I would just like to know when we can get, I'm sure a lot of us want to know when we can get involved as soon as possible.
So I know there's like I appreciate the question. I know there's like all right, we're getting on the campaign trail. We're going to start doing this. But since I do this full time, work the work that we do, or the successes that we have doing this, I think, so sometimes a bit of the campaign, so to speak. But yeah, I want to go back to door knocking when people are comfortable and it's appropriate. I have a very multifamily, densely populated district, so I don't want to go into condos. But in short order, we're gonna have a session that ends like the first week in May, and then we've refiled, we're up and running. So I suck at, I admit, and my consultants and team members all tell me that I suck on the whole call time for money raising and all kinds of self-promoting. I suck at it. I really do. I'm terrible at asking for help. I'm always wanting to give help. So I'm a hard worker, not a great campaigner for self-promotions. I say things that piss a lot of people off a lot of times because I'm very honest about it. So will you help me? Will you help me? Okay, good.
Obviously. So keep our calendars open basically after May of this year.
Yes.
Okay.
But our districts also change a little bit, but yeah. I don't intend to abandon anybody, even if the map changes. I have 560,000 constituents, and I like to be accessible to all.
Yeah, appreciate that. But we'll definitely be on the lookout for when you officially announce the start of that campaign.
Well, okay, I'm officially announcing it right now.
Awesome. There you go.
You heard it here first, guys.
I pressured you a little bit. It worked.
All right, Senator, I can't thank you enough on my personal behalf for you showing up and staying with us for 2 hours. It really does show your dedication. You have a lot of fans here, so if anytime you need any help with anything, you can always reach out to the Young Dems. We're here to help and assist, because we do think that you do really good work in your community. So thank you again. If everyone could just give Senator Pizzo a little round of applause digitally.
If I could just ask, please individually reach out to me if there's any issue, anything going on that you weren't comfortable bringing up or talking about. My takeaway from tonight is I really appreciate and delighted that I was able to share with you. But I want Samantha to reach out to me because I want to work on a bill that speaks to what she's concerned about. Like tomorrow afternoon.
Absolutely.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so
Thanks,
much,
everybody.
Senator. And thank you everyone else, of course. Thank you so much for coming by. Last little bit is please remember to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Come to our website. If you're not already a member, we invite you to be a member. We accept people over the age of 36 as honorary members as well. So once again, thank you everybody for showing up, and have a good night.